In the early 1990s, the economies of Southeast Asia were pulling off the impossible. Countries like Thailand, South Korea, and Indonesia were logging annual growth rates of 8 to 10%, a pace that makes a typical booming economy look like it's standing still. You could see the capital flooding in right on the streets. In Bangkok, the capital of Thailand, developers were throwing up office buildings and high-rises so quickly that there was eventually enough empty office space to house every single office worker in the entire country. Then came July 2nd, 1997. In a matter of hours, that entire economic miracle fractured. Within 6 months, $600 billion in wealth across the region was completely wiped out. The collapse confused almost everyone watching. These nations weren't running massive budget deficits, and inflation was strictly under control. Their citizens were saving money at record highs. On paper, these were some of the healthiest economies on Earth. These nations collapsed because of a hidden flaw in the exact mechanism they used to fund that explosive growth in the first place. To find the root of the crisis in Asia, you actually have to look at the United States. Following a mild recession in the early 90s, the U.S. Federal Reserve slashed interest rates. This pushed global investors to look outside America for better returns on their cash. Southeast Asian countries made themselves incredibly attractive to those hungry investors through a specific policy. They pegged their local currencies directly to the U.S. dollar. They guaranteed that their money would always equal a fixed fraction of a dollar. For foreign banks and hedge funds, this fixed exchange rate eliminated the fear of currency fluctuations. With zero exchange rate risk, the money poured in. Over $256 billion flowed into developing Asian markets between 1990 and 1996. But here is where the trap was set. Local banks and corporations were borrowing all this foreign money in U.S. dollars, and the vast majority of these loans were short-term, meaning they had to be paid back or renewed within a year. They took those short-term dollar loans and sank them into long-term projects back home, like massive real estate developments that wouldn't generate a profit for years. It is the financial equivalent of building a 30-story skyscraper using a 30-day credit card. The entire system survives only as long as you can keep getting new credit cards to pay off the old ones. By the mid-90s, the U.S. economy was recovering. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates, making American investments attractive again, and the endless stream of capital flowing into Asia dried up. This chart shows the mechanics of the peg in action. As U.S. interest rates went up, the value of the U.S. dollar surged, and because the Asian currencies were chained to the dollar, they were forcibly dragged up right alongside it. A strong currency sounds good, but for nations that rely heavily on exporting goods, it is a massive penalty. Thai and South Korean products instantly became more expensive for global buyers, and export growth, the real engine of the Asian miracle, ground to a halt. Back home, all those half-empty skyscrapers weren't generating rent. Domestic companies couldn't make their payments, leaving Thai banks holding tens of billions of dollars in bad debt, what bankers call non-performing loans. Knowing a panic was brewing, foreign currency traders started betting against the Thai Baht. In response, the Thai government frantically burned through its own national savings account, spending $1 billion a month to buy up their own currency and artificially prop up the peg against the rising dollar. It was a losing battle. On July 2, 1997, the government admitted its foreign reserves were gone. They had no choice but to let the baht float, meaning the open market would now dictate its true value. Within months, the baht lost half its value. For any local company that had borrowed in U.S. dollars, the math was devastating. Their revenue was still in local currency, but their foreign debt had effectively doubled overnight. The fixed exchange rate had eliminated investor risk and built the Asian boom. Now, that exact same mechanism had triggered mass bankruptcy. Once investors saw Thailand fall, they realized the exact same debt structure existed in Indonesia, Malaysia, and South Korea. The panic spread like a virus. Foreign banks demanded their money back immediately and refused to roll over short-term loans. The resulting capital flight caused stock markets and currencies across the region to plunge by as much as 90%. The International Monetary Fund stepped in with tens of billions in emergency bailouts, but the money came with strict conditions. Governments were forced to hike interest rates as high as 40% and sell off prized national companies to foreign buyers. With borrowing costs pushed that high, perfectly healthy businesses collapsed. Millions of people lost their jobs overnight. Poverty rates doubled, and the sudden economic shock sparked violent riots in the streets. The situation became so desperate that ordinary citizens in South Korea lined up for hours to donate their wedding rings and personal gold jewelry to the government, just to help pay down the national debt. The entire social foundation of the region was stretched to the breaking point to satisfy the demands of foreign creditors and stabilize the balance sheets. The crash left physical scars that lingered for decades. Massive, half-finished skyscrapers stood entirely abandoned over the Bangkok skyline, monuments to the credit that suddenly stopped flowing. These economies did eventually recover, paying off their loans and returning to growth, but the trauma of 1997 completely rewired their approach to global finance. They learned the hard way that funding domestic growth by borrowing heavily in a currency you do not control is like playing with dynamite. To guarantee they would never again be forced to beg for an international bailout, Asian nations began hoarding massive reserves of foreign currency. They built their own financial shields to protect against future capital flight. Today, China holds over $3 trillion in foreign currency reserves. It is a calculated defensive strategy designed specifically to insulate their massive economy from the sudden shocks of Western monetary policy. In the interconnected world of global finance, you are either the creditor or the debtor, and if you aren't holding the money, you will always be at the mercy of the people who are.